Yeah, this is Stuart Alan Becker. I'm here with Bill Binney, former Technical Director of the National Security Agency of the United States. And we're in downtown Washington, D.C. And the date today is April 26th, 2019. And I said that Elon Musk has said that artificial intelligence is very scary. And I seem to think that you regard it as a double-edged sword that could go either way.
Yeah, that's right. Because it can use it for good or it can use it for bad. In the case of the systems I designed for NSA, I designed them in a way that was used in compatible with the law and the Constitution and respecting privacy of people everywhere in the world. And yet being able to succeed at getting the information that was relevant out of this massive flow of information.
Right.
And so, but they took that and they removed the filtering process that we had that pulled out only the needles from the haystack, if you want. And they removed that filter and simply took in everything. Then once we had data on people on our side, if we had somebody in there that wasn't known to be a bad guy, we would encrypt all their attributes so they had privacy. Even from NSA analysts, they couldn't tell who it was.
And you're proud of that? Yeah, because you were the boss of that project.
Yeah, I was contract representative, all of that, and I ran it, I did the logic, everything, and designed it. And so they removed that protection, and we also had another program behind that that looked at everybody coming into our network, seeing what they're doing with the data. If they're doing something illegal or not allowed, we would detect that within milliseconds and be alerted to that. So people, if they'd have kept that, they got rid of that because they wanted to pull in all the data, have everybody identified, and have no one know what they're doing to or with that data. That's why they removed all that stuff. But if they'd have kept that program at the end monitoring the network, Edward Snowden could never have taken anything that he did because it would have picked him up immediately.
I said, so that's also a double-edged sword.
Yes.
Right, because our own people can hurt us badly because we don't know what they're doing.
Yeah. And that's by design. They don't want that to happen. I mean, that's what I went to NSA management. I said, I can do this for the entire world from NSA, everything in the world. So we can have everything monitored all the time, know what everybody's doing, and if they're violating something, we tell almost immediately, and we can either stop them or let them proceed and compile evidence for prosecution. However you want to do it. They said, you mean to tell me that Congress can come in and look and see all the programs we have that are failing, and they can detect return on investment on all the programs? I said, sure, they can do that. They said, you're never going to do this.
Oh, okay.
When I get to the ground of you and your feeling as an American, as a boy growing up, were you in the D.C. area?
Actually, no. I grew up in central western Pennsylvania.
And did your family have any tradition, like Dad served in the war or anything
he
like
was
that?
in World War II. He served with Omar Bradley.
So you grew up in a flag-waving household. And so when you went to NSA, you were quite a patriot.
I joined the Army in '65, and I got out in '69, and then joined NSA in 1970.
Okay, and so you think that what you're doing now is equally as patriotic as anything you ever did in those years?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because it's it's defending the Constitution, something that our congressional people should be doing, something that our people in the military, people in the NSA, people in the different agencies should be doing, because the oath of office they take is to protect and defend the Constitution, and that they're so central to violating every principle of that. It's like treason against the founding principles of this nation.
Well said, Bill Binney. Okay, you spoke of the soft coup from the Department of Justice and the FBI against Trump. During your NSA years, in the early years, that kind of partisanship in the security agencies would have been unthinkable. How did this come to pass, that all these guys became partisans?
I think it took a long period of time. I think it started in the 1970s, early 70s, where the shift in the intelligence community became looking at programs and contracts as opposed to the mission of doing defense of the nation and so on. So the emphasis was shifting to getting money for building empires and so on. And that only got worse after Reagan, and he started pumping money into the intelligence community and the government and the military. And so that emphasis kept shifting more and more. And actually by the late 80s, it was really pretty bad even then, because people weren't. When you go up and tell, like I'd solve a system or something, I know how it worked. I'd go up and say, here's how you need to program this, and it's very simple, just start and do it. Well, they would never, I could give them the outline of it, even write the logic or the flow chart for the software, and they wouldn't do it. So I could never get anything done. So then I said, well, obviously you have to run my own contracts. So I did that, and by 1995 I was running my own contracts in the Signal Automation Research Center. I had about 5 of them running simultaneously. And we would succeed rapidly because we would focus on what the mission was, what the mission objectives were, and the things it took to get there, and nothing else. That made it possible to succeed. That's what the problem is today. They're just taking in everything, they're dumping it on people and saying, here, you figure it out. And I said, well, okay, let me just do some calculations. I'm a mathematician, so I do calculations. Roughly speaking, from between the Five Eyes and about 9 other countries that are participating in this bulk acquisition of everything on everybody, they have probably 20,000 analysts looking at it. That includes CIA, FBI, NSA, DHS, and some of the other State Department has some, and then the other countries and all that. So there's about 20,000 of them looking at it. And then the population they're looking at is about 4.5 billion. So you divide that 20,000 into 4.5 billion, and each one has they have to monitor over 200,000 people. Now, what analysts could do that? That's the problem. Even back in the 1990s, when we started the ThinThread program, we did it to address that issue, because even back then, with the minimal amount of collection they had, they were still overburdened. They would get 10,000 items every day, and they couldn't even get through those 10,000. Now they can get 1 million or more. So that even back then, the whole objective of the program of doing a focused, disciplined, professional job of targeting was to reduce that problem to something that was manageable, so they could actually succeed and stop terrorist attacks and threats to the nation.
So, my understanding of you and how you really started to get upset about what was happening is that you're the guy the mathematician, the computer guy who came up with this kind of a wonderful engine that could surveil, but you had built in the protections for U.S. citizens and for other citizens, and even the NSA people couldn't see it. But then when 9/11 happened, all that changed, and that's when you said, hey, that's what you're doing is wrong.
Yeah.
Have I got that right?
Pretty much, but there's also a little dirty secret, and it's in the court records with Quest. Joe Naccio, who used to be the CEO of Quest,
Right.
he was approached in February of 2001, about 7 months before 9/11, and asked by NSA to turn over all the data on his customers. Now, I don't know how many million U.S. citizens that meant, but they were actually talking about and trying to get started in doing that, because by that time we had succeeded at putting our program together all the way to the end. So we had everything lined up to run.
And so how did you feel about, did the Quest guy react predictably and just hand it all over to the government, or?
No, here's what happened to him. He said, okay, you give me a warrant signed by a judge, and I'll do it. Well, they wouldn't do that, of course.
Of course.
So what happened? They went into data and fabricated evidence against him. He told me this. I talked to him. That's what they did to us, but we caught them at it. That's why we're not in jail. He went to jail for 5 years. And he became the poster boy for every other CEO of every telecommunications company. You don't cooperate with us, this is what happens to you.
An example, like they're trying to do to Assange.
Right. What they tried to do with Jim Rosen, or the Associated Press, or what they did to Elliot Spitzer. He was going after the bankers for defrauding people.
Oh, that's why he was destroyed, the hookers and all that.
What was the problem? Well, where did they find out about it? So why what was the probable cause?
Did you know that?
What was the probable cause for going after L.A. Spitzer? Oh, he's going after our bankers.
I remember Spitzer.
Right, but I to this moment thought Spitzer was arrogant and villainous, and now for the first time I realized the truth thanks to you.
You can look it up. I mean, you don't have to believe me. It's on the web. It's really a shame that they went after him because he was trying to hold people accountable to the law.
You're a special person. In addition to being a mathematician and a computer scientist, you're also a student of history. And I heard you say in one of the YouTube speeches that I listened to, the talks, about Praetorian Guard, about what happened. You said this is nothing new, and you cited the Roman Empire, and you cited other things. And so here we are today. Can you go back to the Roman Empire or similar things, and then come to today and compare what's happening today with what happened back then?
Yeah, actually, I had some good direct analogies to Nazi Germany in 1933.
Right.
Especially with the NDA, National Defense Authorization Act, Section 1021,
Right.
which talked about the ability of the president to define somebody as a terrorist, have the military incarcerate them, hold them indefinitely without no due process at all. That is almost word for word exactly what Special Order 48 says that the Nazis issued after the Reichstag fire in 1933.
Right, and that's NDAA 1021.
Right, and they did that to get rid of anybody that opposed them, all their political enemies and anybody else they didn't like.
And it's available to be used today in the same way.
It's just sitting there waiting.
Now, Achilles' heel for the government's bulk acquisition of data on citizens is the private companies that work on their behalf.
Right.
So how do we nail those guys?
I've been advocating this in Europe, that they sue them because they're violating their laws. They're turning over data to the NSA and U.S. government and others without the permission of the individuals in Europe. European law says any of the data that a person creates, no matter who holds it, the data belongs to that person. If you want to share that with somebody else, you have to get their permission to do it. Otherwise, you're violating our law, and that goes into the GDPR, that new law that's coming out for data protection. And the fine is up to 21 million euros per event.
And so is that European Union as a whole, or is that Germany? Who's the leader? Who's the leader?
It's the European Union.
Okay.
It's GDPR covers the European Union. Yeah. I would also say, though, that Austria has now taken, we've addressed this problem to the Austrian ministers, also to the press and the people in Austria, and it was just before they voted on a bill to do bulk acquisition in Austria. And so, as a result of that, I think we helped anyway. The Supreme Court in Austria ruled that the bulk acquisition of data is unconstitutional. And the Parliament voted down that bill to do bulk acquisition. So I think it's dead. Austria is the first country to go against this domino game that's been going on. I called it a metastasizing malignancy that's spreading and destroying the democracies around the world. This bulk acquisition.
And but the historical analogies are still apropos. The ones with the Nazi Germany, the ones with the Praetorian Guard, the Roman Empire, and here we are today.
KGB, the Stasi.
Right. Right. And so if I'm in power in Washington and I've got this huge secret bureaucracy, I can be orders of magnitude more terrible than my predecessors could have been because they were checked by good folks in the bureaucracy who said, no, sorry, that's the truth, and we will not be coerced by you,
Right.
Mr. Powerman.
That's why they wanted to get rid of me at NSA. Yeah. But I mean, it's. That's what they use against President Trump. For example, they did that for him. I had been telling him he's being spied on all along. It's not a question. This bulk acquisition, all this data is stored. So, and it builds, what are called timelines of relationships that you have in your community over whatever period of time you want. That's already stored and available in the computer.
Right.
It's all the software that we did that enabled that, and it happens on everything. So you didn't have to do anything. All you have to do is call it up. You'll see your whole timeline of anybody you want. Anybody.
Can you tell me what is the there are things that I don't know about myself because I've never collected the data points about my internet habits, my food habits, my
sure.
girls' interests, or anything like that. Can you tell me the scariest thing about, like, let's just say Bill Binney, and then what astonished you when you learned about connecting the dots on people, the depth of what you can predict about people quickly?
Well, actually, I was quite successful doing this against the Soviet Union, and what I really ended up being able to do was I knew them like the back of my hand, so that if they started, if they were going to do anything, I knew exactly how they were going to do it, and I could see in advance everything that I needed to look for to say at what stage of that development or operation are they, and I could see that very clearly.
I'd love to talk to you more about that. I majored in Russian studies at the University of
very
Hawaii. I was in the
logical.
Russian studies program.
Yeah.
And that's why I really love Ray McGovern, because that was his baby.
It was,
Yeah.
I was the technical side, but Ray was the political side. But what I got a lot out of their doctrine. When you read their doctrine, I said, I understood this all from the technology anyway. And that's exactly what they're doing. Oh, by the way, this makes everything very clear in words that are understandable by anybody. So, and that's where it became pretty clear to me. And there was nobody else at NSA doing it. Nobody.
But I mean, I have to say that I'm impressed that you, in your Cold War role at the NSA, you really had your fingers on what the Russians were doing. Which leads me to ask the question, were you irritated when Pollard sold his secrets, including launch codes? I don't know if you knew that. That's the first thing intelligence agencies do. Kimberly's or any of that. They go, no, it's a small thing, it's a small thing. No, he was the head of the counterintelligence. They always try to reduce the magnitude of it. That's their first instinct. Same with Pollard. When we first heard about Pollard, oh no, he was just a spy. No. He gave all the launch code. He gave the whole 9 yards to the Russians. What?
Yeah. Well, I can't talk about some of the stuff I did.
Okay.
So I can't tell you.
Okay.
So, but let's just say I was doing similar things and I didn't need any help. Okay. Let's do it that way. No, and I had Pelton was the guy from NSA that did the most damage there.
Right.
He actually gave away some of the solutions I had made, and so that it took them 5 years to adjust to that. But I did. But I mean, even after that, it was still I was still capable of doing. I mean, that didn't prevent me from doing anything I needed to do. Let's put it that way.
I have a suspect that you got collected. But you seem like an ideal person to listen in on over there. I've got years of stuff. Yeah, you too, huh?
Yeah.
You have a radar for that kind. I don't like being. I don't want to go to the bathroom with you. I don't want you to go to the bathroom with me. And it's common courtesy. But Facebook and these guys, they want to get right in your toilet, and it's disgusting.
Facebook, I'm not a slave. I don't work for free. They have 1.5 billion people doing stuff for them for nothing.
That's right.
And they take the benefits of all this.
Right, and then pretend it's
And
all okay.
that's why I'm pushing the Europeans to sue them, because at 21 million euros per event, they do a few million a day. Times a few 21 millions fines, you're out of business quickly.
Well, in Myanmar, I was the bureau chief for the Myanmar Times on July 3rd, 2014, and some militant monks put out on a small monk website that a Buddhist girl had been raped by a couple of Muslim brothers who run the Sun Tea Cafe, but that was a false report. Turns out they paid her to put that up. Next thing you know, a bunch of Myanmar guys, like semi-government guys with machetes in holsters on their backs, came up, and they were just looking for Muslim guys to hurt. And all of this was propagated on Facebook by a guy in New York who was a Burmese guy who was, an Americanized Burmese, and he just propagated the hell out of it.
Well,
and next thing you know, and then they took this poor little guy, Uso Mint, walking along. I told you on the phone.
Yeah.
And then they cleaved him in the head, and his mother, and I was there, and I go, what the hell? hell, how can we hold anybody accountable? I'm a media freedom guy, right? But it's holding people accountable. So I think the business model is what we ought to crush. And I think it also, every U.S. embassy worldwide says, like us on Facebook. That is like dressing the army in a Ronald McDonald suit. It's ridiculous.
Well, look at it this way also. This gets to the bad part of the Praetorian Guard.
Right.
They feed information in to say the weapons of mass destruction are in Iraq. They weren't.
Of course not.
So we go and kill a couple 100,000 people.
Innocent people.
Yeah. Or they say, this destroyer was attacked in the Tonkin Gulf. And it wasn't. Even the captain of the
Special
ship
Activities
said
Division.
it wasn't. I mean, even the captain of the ship, they didn't believe him, so we went and killed a couple of million people. This is the
And
danger.
that's not me, and that's not you, and that's not Mike. That's not what we do. But there's a cancer that's what they do.
That's the cancer.
And that's what I'm here to do, and I'm with you 100% on
And they're the
that.
ones that...
Hope you understand.
And
I do understand.
And they've metastasized this around the countries of the world. I mean, we started this.
The perversity.
Brits, of
The
course,
perversity.
Yeah, the Brits are with us all the way, and then we get the Poles and the Germans and the Japanese, and
It's corrupting others
Yes.
who are otherwise can be good
And
people.
then what they do is they use this bulk data to look for criminal activity inside their own country and in violation of their own constitution.
Yeah.
And then they do parallel constructions again, using standard policing techniques. Once they know where it is and arrest the people, they can't use the data in a court of law because it wasn't acquired by warrant, so you have to go create the data. So you use your standard policing techniques. It helps that you know where it is, okay? So you could quickly get that, and then you substitute that in a court of law. That's corrupting the entire judicial process.
Absolutely.
I mean, and so I call it a planned, programmed perjury policy run by the Department of Justice of the United States.
I get you. Okay, the culture of the NSA versus the culture of the CIA, the culture of the FBI, the culture of the Defense Intelligence Agency. What's the NSA culture? I've never really understood that. But it's something that you loved and thrived in at the time.
I didn't love it, no.
Never?
No.
Really?
No, because it was very restricted, very closed. You only did what you did with everybody else. So in other words, everybody moves together. You don't pop up above the level of everybody else, and you get
your head chopped off if you do.
Hammered down.
Right.
Yeah. So you get back in line. So in other words, everything I tried to do. I mean, I was I wanted to understand everything I was involved in. So I wouldn't just stay within my little realm. I gave the
Curious guy.
Yeah. How does this relate to anything else? And so I started doing that, and every time I came up and said, "Well, why don't we do this?" Because look at this relationships and stuff. Every time I did that, I got all kinds of opposition. And this went on for years. And I said, well, obviously, if I want to do something, I can't tell anybody. This is inside NSA.
You learned that inside NSA.
That's right. And so I never asked for permission. I only asked for forgiveness, and that only when it was necessary.
It's easier to beg forgiveness than to seek permission.
That's right. And so, but that way I could achieve things. Otherwise, I mean, I had 8 banks of computers, 8 acres, I'm sorry, 8 acres under the
Fort Meade.
They were all supporting a lot of things that was feeding me, and I could see all the problems with it. And I said, well, here I can have this mathematical solution that would wipe out a lot of these problems. I couldn't get anybody to do it. So I said, okay, I had a friend, and it's in the movie A Good American that they made about me.
A Good American.
Yeah, you
okay.
watch
A
that.
Good American. We're going to watch it.
It's on the web. You can see it for free. And in there, I said, I have this mathematical solution on this system I solved. So why don't we put it into an algorithm and fix all this crap? And I said this to my friend who was a good programmer. He's the best C language programmer at NSA. So
he's still there?
No, he died, unfortunately. So we're all old. So, but he and I got together, and he said, yeah, somebody just gave me this little PC, a 2-disk drive, 64K RAM PC. 1983 this was.
Right.
So he said, somebody gave me this on my desk. I'd like to use it for something. And I said, I have this solution. Can you get that inside that storage? He says, yeah, I think I could do that. So we did this. And what it did was it just ran rings around 8 acres of computers.
On a little PC.
And I, you know, yeah, and they, for example, when I wanted to do something, they would, the computer people would say, well, write me a requirement memo and I'll do it for you. And they never did. Okay, they would do that. They would get the money, you know, and do their thing, but they would never solve my problem. So this way, I bypassed them all and solved my little problem on this little 2-disk drive, 64K RAM PC. So I thought, well, I should call these people and tell them they ought to come up here and look at this, you know. And so I put it in the movie. And I really had a good laugh over it.
Yeah.
So they came up and I said, see this little program I have here, this didn't work, see that? And I put it in there and up would come the answer and I'd do the next one. Yeah. I would just flip the pages on all those printouts that they were throwing at me from this 8 acres of computers. And when I say, here it didn't solve this, look at this. Here it didn't solve this, look at this. I said, don't you think that's kind of neat? He said, yeah, don't you? They said, yeah, don't you think it should be made from? I said, sure it should. Send me a memo and I'll give it to you. It was like the reverse.
Right, yeah.
I had to do that to them.
Send me a memo. Right.
Yeah.
But this idea, oh, go on,
Yeah, well,
finish your point.
I eventually gave it to him, so anyway.
But this idea of you being the guy who designs the system, and then the system is
Corrupt.
taken over by people and then used in a way that's horrible, was also depicted in the Snowden film with what they
Yeah.
called epic shelter. So was that true that he had designed something quite brilliant and that he
Edward Snowden?
Yeah.
No, Edward was the administrator of the programs that were running.
Oh, so he didn't build an epic
No, Nicolas
shelter.
Cage was my character.
No, yeah,
But
right.
That designed the systems that were running.
Okay.
You know, Edward looked at the overall network.
But you never met Edward Snowden?
No, I
in real
never
life.
did.
That
He
was a
came in.
fabricated.
I left there in 2001. He came in 2003.
Okay.
So we're off timeline off.
Right. But
I met his parents though at the National Press Club here in D.C. They accepted the Sam Adams Award for him.
and let's speak a word about Snowden while we're on the topic.
Well-
Hero, etc. What do you say? I'm not putting words in your mouth.
I lean more toward hero, although I think there's some of this material he shouldn't have done, but I don't think it did as much damage as anybody thought. You know, they say, well, just exposing, you know, all this, making threats to
Okay,
everything. But,
so
you know,
what's the most dangerous? There's muscular, there's, I forget the names of all of them. What's the most dangerous?
upstream.
Upstream.
Yeah,
That's
because
dangerous.
upstream are the taps on the fiber networks where they're using theirs and variant devices to capture everything on the line and then store it.
So upstream's the most
Upstream.
dangerous. And
Muscular also contributed in the upstream. It's a part of that, but it's a subset. Okay, but muscular was the unilateral taps that had between the data centers for Google and their Yahoo and various other people. They didn't know they were tapped, by the way. This was the charade of 702 and the PRISM program.
Right.
Where they would come and ask for data on a specific person in the PRISM program from the companies. So the companies would comply with that because they have warrant or something, no justification for that.
then
And that
take it
shows
off.
them, and they showed them, they showed them that this is how we're complying with the law. Well, this is a charade. You know, it's like, you know, the pay no attention to man behind the curtain because,
Right.
you know, behind the curtain, the muscular program and the upstream, they're capturing everything.
Okay.
Every time they
And
back
so
up everything, they
this
would capture it
inverse
all.
quality, let's explain it apropos to that. You said that when you have things in the dark, ostensibly the bureaucrats would say, hey, we can do anything we want, we can get and get away with it. And then how does that become a monster that doesn't serve the public, like the back doors, the double-edged sword of the back doors?
Well, you know, it's pretty clear. I mean, the real danger is not the Russians in terms of cybersecurity, it's the Chinese.
Okay.
The Chinese are way ahead of them.
They're way ahead of the
way
Russians.
ahead. Yeah, they've been in this game all the while. So, and you know, we of course know about that. And we should be standing out and saying, yeah, they're the real cyber threats here. So they are the real ones. The Israelis are also pretty good, you know, so they're not bad either. So they are also a threat. But for example, in the when they did that, when these Vault 7 was released, or some of the stuff from NSA, some of that was turned around against them, and I forget, WannaCry, I think was the virus that came. went across Europe and around the world.
Right,
That,
I remember,
yeah,
with the worm.
Yeah, well, that was only one of thousands of attacks. Now, those thousands of attacks means they know the weaknesses in firewalls, operating systems, servers, networks, all of that. And they got these, by the thousands, they have a couple 100 million lines of source code. I mean, that's thousands of attacks. So they're not fixing those. So but that means so they can look in at everybody, what they're doing.
So your point, the double-edged sword that you're saying is that if our government can look at
Others
us
can do
through a
it.
back door, everybody can.
Others
and
can-
that's bad for the whole society.
That's right. But the other swindle, the swindle comes, just like the swindle for, privacy versus security. You have to give up privacy security. And that's been a lie from the beginning.
It's been a lot.
And everybody knew that from what we knew, what we'd already done and demonstrated in NSA in the 90s. They just didn't, what that happened, didn't cost that much, was a cheap operation, So, and besides, it didn't give him for Cheney, I call him Darth Cheney.
Right.
He went to the dark side.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for him, it didn't give him knowledge about everybody that was his potential enemy. So he wanted to know that on everybody. So that was that. That was the first swindle. The second swindle is the cyber stuff. If you don't fix the problems you know about, you don't have cybersecurity. And if you don't have cybersecurity, you get attacked. And when you get attacked, you say, I need more money for cybersecurity. That's a swindle. We're being swindled. Now, the new one is the Russiagate. We got to keep this Russiagate going. Why? We want to start a new Cold War so we can swindle everybody out of a couple $1 trillion.
Right, good, because it's defense money and appropriations and all this kind of good, Lockheed and wherever else.
That's right. Now, very few people get happy and the rest of us pay for it.
Right. Now, more about the Chinese. So I just throw that to you, and then I open the door for you to discuss the Chinese with me and what we can expect out of them in the future.
Well, I mean, they participate in a lot of intellectual theft, and that's done by their operations of the network. So you're breaking into things, stealing things, and things like that. So that's cyber. That's a cyber operation. That's their active attack versions.
And they're much better at it than
They've
the
been going
Russians.
at it for decades. Yeah.
Decades.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Snowden movie, you were technical director. There's a scene in Switzerland, and Snowden met a CIA officer, like the Philip Giraldi type, an actual spy, which Snowden wasn't. Snowden was just like a techie guy at the time. But they knew each other, and he invited him to participate in an operation so he could become more operational or whatever. And then it was kind of screwed up. They suborned this poor sort of Muslim banker guy, Iranian or whatever he was. And so I'm asking, did that come, as far as you know, did that come from real life, and does that ring true? Because it stuck in my craw as an original thing of why Snowden did what he did. Like, he saw that happen and says, it's horrible.
That's pretty standard.
It's standard.
Yeah. In fact, I had people come into my office who were going to be in a position in Moscow, for example, or other countries, and they'd say, I can prostitute my wife while I'm there and get information from anybody you want. I said, I do not want anybody doing that. I don't need to have that done because I already know what I need to know from that place. So you don't need to do anything. I mean, they were willing to put people's lives in danger to make that to get information. I said, I don't need you to do that.
That's you, Bill Binney, but a culture of you and CIA. So CIA, do you regard the CIA as a nasty outfit?
The operations side can be nasty.
What about against you or against me or against Mike or against right here in the USA?
Yeah.
No problem. We'll screw with you anytime we want.
Actually, one of the reasons that we have been safe since 9/11 is a CIA operation. It was a very professional, disciplined, targeted thing. They went around the world, took all of the Al-Qaeda people out.
No, I really need to go sometime.
And they did it in a very targeted,
I hadn't
disciplined way. It was a very good job.
To their
and they
credit.
succeeded. Yeah.
their
And that's the
credit.
reason we were safe. None of this other crap contributed to anything to that.
Okay, but culture, so you don't have bad things to say about them?
I mean,
Your NSA
there
culture,
are.
I'm trying to
I mean, in
understand
the
the cultural
background,
differences.
but in the background, see, there are other sections that were doing assassinations, around the world. We shouldn't be doing that. And presidents have said we shouldn't be doing that, but we did do that, and it was CIA doing it.
Okay.
So, you know,
But NSA is much, much bigger than the CIA.
yeah, but it's more technical, you know, we do mental
But it's
things.
huge, right?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
All right, so almost finished, and what do you want the public to know that they don't know about how they're being mass surveyed? Just generally, like if you could loudspeaker it out, what would you say? Hey, folks, wake up.
Everything you do electronically, with credit cards, you know, emails, phone calls, everything is being captured and monitored and scanned in one form or another by software or people, mostly by software.
And then it is bumped up, if certain keywords are met, and it's bumped up, and then some guy, some bureaucrat will say,
Yeah, and it actually, this is the other bad side of this kind of stuff, bad side of AI. After 9/11, they took a principle I was trying to get them to understand, this 2-degree principle from a known bad guy. And they took that and used that to send thousands of references of Muslims inside the United States to the FBI. And they went through each and every one of them, put them in, a lot of them they put in jail for a long time, and none of them panned out as anything relevant. What they didn't understand was the 2-degree principle identified zones of suspicion, not zones of guilt.
I see, and that's something that you're very adamant about.
Exactly.
Say we can surveil, but we don't act until we have evidence of
And then
a two.
And it's all done based on people's behavior.
Right.
You know, your association with bad guys, or your association with bad websites that are advocating pedophilia or bomb making or what, you know, violence against the West, the things that start to, you know, convert people to the radical terrorism or things like that. That's the kind of thing you look at and watch and see how frequently people visit. Do they keep coming back? And then you say, we really need to look at this person to see if they are in fact becoming radicalized, you know? That's the zone of suspicion. It doesn't mean they're guilty, but it means you got to look at them.
How about journalists like me?
You would fall into the category rather quickly, I guess, if you interview anybody that would, you know, and connect it with somebody. For me, for example, yeah. And then you'd be looked at, and if you were found to be a journalist, say you're a journalist, so you're excluded.
I'm excluded.
I would. You get targeted. Under the current regime, you're targeted.
For sure.
Yeah.
So don't make any mistake about that.
No.
Okay. What about operationally? Could somebody come and just try and screw me up? I mean, could they put a worm in and destroy?
If they can do that.
And would they? I mean, I'm not such a venomous person. I do have connections. You know, I'm not like a jihadist or anything like that. I'm more like a student of philosophy. You know, Chomsky made a big impression. I was a right-wing Reaganite. My dad's a decorated first aircraft Huey pilot, shot down 3 times, got the Distinguished Flying Cross, and that's how I grew up. Right?
Yeah.
I was you know, America's great guy, and then I started with the philosophy, and then I listened to Ray, and I say, hey, something's wrong. So I think I can serve like you, my patriotic feelings and duties by fighting what's wrong, by fighting the cancer.
Right.
And so, but nevertheless, there's other people who don't think so. And those are the ones who can fuck with us. So I'm just asking you for my benefit of what you know, like what should I look out for, or what should I avoid, or any tips on, not just for me, any citizen, things that we can do to avoid, you know, being surveilled and flagged and messed with.
I think it's virtually impossible to avoid that surveillance, because now they're connecting video up with, they have a program called Treasure Map, and NSA does. And this is the program to tell where every device is in, every minute of the day, where it is in the world. In other words, they know where your cell phone is every minute of the day, so they know where you are. Or then they take the video, try to match it with somebody who's in that video at that time, in that proximity, and then they can get your face. So now they get your face. Now they start building the profile of what you look like. And then they can start to use that to help identify you anywhere you go. So, you know, it's pretty hard to avoid that. Anytime you transmit anything electronically, it's in the network. It goes through the public switch telephone network, or it goes through the internet, And
You don't seem like a frightened or disturbed or paranoid man, and I don't want to be a
No.
frightened, disturbed, or paranoid man. So for me and the rest of the citizens, Mike and everybody, what's your recipe? Just keep on trucking,
keep
do the
on-
best you can?
Keep on trucking, don't say anything you don't want everybody reading.
Right.
Okay.
The internet never forgets.
No, and you can, it's all retroactively analyzed, by the way, too. I mean, everything's stored for whatever period of time they can keep it. I estimated the storage capacity at Utah, that
Right, a
facility,
huge new facility.
1 million square foot facility, storage facility only.
Provo, I think, or...
And I estimated the storage there at 5 zettabytes. That's 5 times 10 to the 21st characters. So it gets to be quite a bit. And I did that by somebody from Cisco who sells them the routers to route data to that center. Said in a little line, they said, oh, well, we estimate the amount of data going to that center every year is going to be about 966 exabytes by 2015. Well, that's almost a zettabyte. And so they got to have at least 5 years there, so I said 5 zettabytes. And then that meant, because they're the whole objective is collect everything, so everything's always increasing year after year, more and more communications. That means you have to collect more and more. That means you have to store more and more. That means you have to build larger storage facilities. So the one they're doing on Fort Meade now is 2.8 million square feet. It's almost 3 times the size of Utah. They took out a whole 36-hole golf course to do that. You can see it on Google Earth.
Wow. Astonishing. So constitutionally, my good man, you have lawsuits going right now. Could you go over first regarding the Constitution, regarding the surveillance state, and what us citizens can do to take back our privacy, and then also what constitutional lawsuits are you involved in now so that we can understand your activism and your purpose?
Well, let me start with the lawsuits first. I have 2 that I put sworn affidavits in. This is where I'm swearing on oath to the court that I can testify to this truth. And the one in the Ninth Circuit with the EFF's been going on for like 6 or 8 years. And so it's still dragging on. I like the one in the Third Circuit because it was after Snowden's material came out, was published. And so now I can use that, since it's a public domain, I can use those as exhibits in my, which I did, in my affidavit to the Third Circuit Court. And in there I said, I invented half this crap. I know what it all does, and I know the capacity and capability of it, and I'm prepared to testify that in open court.
And what's your charge? What are you charging?
Because I was charging them with the upstream program tapping points in the United States.
As an unconstitutional?
As an unconstitutional act. So they're collecting all this data on, and they call it coincidental collection. Right. Now here's the logic. They're using Executive Order 12333, Section 123C. That section. And it simply says if you're after a terrorist or an international criminal, you can take down a whole line and search it and store it and continue to search it. Now that means that they can put on a 10 gigabit line, 64 fibers, they can take everything off that with the narrowest device. And they can do that. That's capable since 2003.
And what you're saying is that under that guise, they can scoop everything on everybody.
Everything on everybody.
Which is wrong.
That's unconstitutional. Yeah.
Right. And so if you're worried that the United States is going to get attacked by some brat of a jihadist, and that's their counter-argument, then how would Bill Binney design the system such that we're protected, yet we protect privacy as well?
Okay, there were several things. One, for targeting, I use 3 logics, deductive, inductive, and abductive. Deductive simply means if you're connected with somebody in banking or phone calls or emails or in any way connections, chatter or whatever, then we have a graph of your relationships. If you're a bad guy, then everybody in that graph is a suspect. That's the zone of suspicion.
Right.
And you only go out 2 degrees. You don't get any further than that because it goes up exponentially.
Right.
You stop it at 2.
2 degrees
And the only reason you do that is because you want to get front companies. So behind that company is the guilty party. So you want to go to 2 degrees to see that. That's it. All right, that's for the deductive. And then for the abductive or the inductive, You're looking for people visiting sites that are advocating terror and violence and things like that, and pedophilia, and swindling and smuggling, and how do you do it, and all this stuff. How do you do laundering of money, stuff like that. And you see who visits them, and you're not actually interfering with it. You're just watching who's looking at these things, the frequency they do, and so on. And then you could see, well, these people need to be looked at. So in that case, that's the inductive. And the abductive is more of a vagary kind of application, where you simply say, look at the world and say, here are the countries involved in terrorism. And do I have a network, a community that graphs mostly within that group of countries? If it does, I need to look at them for potential terrorism relations. Otherwise, everybody else goes right by.
Okay, and that's
then-
what you would do. That's
and then-
that's Binney's
Yeah,
recipe
Binney- and
for a decent society.
And then there's another way to get at penetrations of attacks. You're looking to see if somebody's coming into your computer. First, you have to define your network. What constitutes your network? What are the wires? Where are the computers that are attached? Where are the opening ports? And where do they go? You need to know that to be able to defend it. Okay, so once you do that, you say, okay, what in my network do I want to defend? I'll put a perimeter around that. These are the only terminals that are allowed to enter that space. Anybody coming into those computers that have authorization to enter that space trying to get through is an intruder. It's an attack. So you say, I'm going to route you to the corner automatically, software-wise, and just say, this is an attack, don't know what it is, don't care, it's an attack. So this way you stop the attack from the first attack on. Like now, they have to get an attack, see it, and then recognize it, and then try to design recognition code to look at the sequence of lines of code coming in and says, this is that attack, you know?
Right.
Well, my point is that all you need to do is detect an intruder that's not supposed to be there. And if you do that, you're attacked.
Yeah, I sense from you that you were really, really good at what you did, and that you're just irritated that they took that in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and they haven't adopted any of the abductive, deductive, or inductive approach, or even the intruder detection.
And I just wonder how much IRC is surveilled. A lot. It's all collected.
Everything.
Right. Everything.
It's a matter of whether or not they want to have people look at you. Now, for Trump, they've been having people look at him for a very long time.
Right. And so, okay,
And they only
switch that off. We're going to go off the record now.